Have you ever felt that inexplicable sensation of déjà vu when you met someone for the first time? That strange certainty that you've known this person for much longer than is logically possible? Maybe you thought you were going crazy. Or maybe people told you that you were obsessed, that you needed to move on, that it was just a crush, but you knew it wasn't. Because when you looked into that person's eyes, it wasn't love at first sight. It was recognition at first sight. As if your soul had cried out, "Where have you been? I've been searching for you through lifetimes." Carl Jung called this archetypal recognition, and he understood that it wasn't imagination or romanticization. It was the soul recognizing another soul with whom it had shared experiences in dimensions far beyond rational comprehension. When two destined souls meet, the first sign isn't overwhelming passion or irresistible physical attraction. It's recognition. It's that disturbing yet comforting sensation of finally being home, even when you're with someone you just met. It's as if every conversation you've ever had in your life was just rehearsal for the conversations you would have with this person. As if all previous relationships were merely preparation for understanding what true soul intimacy means. Jung discovered that this recognition happens because certain souls carry the same vibrational frequency, the same energetic signature that resonates across different planes of existence. They recognize each other not because they met before in this lifetime, but because they're part of the same cosmic configuration, the same constellation of consciousness that was created to complement and amplify each other. And when this recognition happens, something activates in both people that goes far beyond what they can control or rationally explain. In this video, you'll understand how to recognize when you've found a soul truly destined for yours, and most importantly, why the obstacles that seem to try to separate you actually exist to strengthen a connection that's much greater than either of you imagine. If you stay until the end, you'll understand why Jung believed these encounters are marked by destiny long before they happen, and how to identify if you're living one of these extraordinary connections that changes the course of two lives forever. There's a moment in life when you look at someone and know, without a shadow of doubt, that this person isn't a casual encounter. It's not just attraction. It's not just compatibility. It's not even just love. It's something much deeper and more unsettling than that. It's as if your soul recognized something in them that it had forgotten about itself long ago. As if two parts of the same cosmic truth finally reunited after being separated since the beginning of time. Carl Jung dedicated decades of his life studying these extraordinary encounters that transcend all rational logic, and discovered something that would forever change our understanding of human connections. He realized that when two truly destined souls meet, they create such a powerful force that no external obstacle, no adverse circumstance, no physical or temporal distance can break the bond that establishes between them. But what almost no one tells you about these connections is that they don't come to be easy. They come to be transformative, and this is where the journey becomes complex. Because the universe, in its infinite wisdom, doesn't place two destined souls in an easy and comfortable situation. That would be too simple. It would just be another ordinary relationship disguised as a special connection. Instead, it orchestrates an intricate dance of approaches and distances, of meetings and near misses, of impossible synchronicities and apparent coincidences that constantly test the authenticity and depth of the connection. Jung observed that the most transformative situations in human life always come accompanied by challenges proportional to their importance. And when two destined souls meet, the challenges they face aren't random. They're precisely designed to strengthen the bond between them, to burn away everything that's superficial and reveal only what's essential and eternal. Time can seem like an enemy. You might meet at the wrong moment, when one or both are committed to other people, other cities, other life plans. Distance can impose itself as an apparently insurmountable obstacle. Families may not approve. Societies may not understand. Circumstances may conspire to keep you separated. But Jung discovered something extraordinary. The greater the external resistance, the stronger the internal connection becomes. It's as if each obstacle were an opportunity for the connection to deepen, for souls to recognize each other not just in ease, but especially in adversity. The first force that tries to separate destined souls is fear. Fear of intensity, fear of transformation, fear of losing control over one's own life. Because when you find your destined soul, you intuitively know that you won't be the same person after this encounter. And that prospect can be terrifying. Jung understood that the human ego seeks security, predictability, control, And a destined soul connection represents exactly the opposite of all that. It represents surrender, vulnerability, radical transformation. It represents the possibility of becoming more than you imagined you were capable of. But it also means letting old versions of yourself die that no longer serve. Many people pull back at this moment. They prefer the security of the known, even if it's limiting, over the adventure of the unknown, even if it's liberating. And this is where many destined soul connections go through periods of temporary separation. Not because love ended, not because the connection was illusory, but because one or both people need time to prepare themselves emotionally, spiritually, psychologically to sustain a bond of this magnitude. Jung called this a period of accelerated individuation. It's as if the presence of the destined soul activated processes of personal growth that would normally take years to happen, but which condense into months or even weeks. It's an intense period, often confusing and painful, but absolutely necessary for both people to develop the emotional maturity needed to live such a deep connection without losing themselves in it. During these temporary separations, something magical happens. Instead of weakening the bond, distance intensifies it. Jung observed that truly destined souls maintain constant telepathic communication, even when they're not physically together. They dream of each other, feel each other's emotions from a distance, pick up intuitions about what the other is experiencing, even without direct contact. It's as if there existed an invisible thread connecting these two consciousnesses that no physical distance can cut. And during these separation periods, each person does deep internal work. They heal old wounds that would prevent the bond from flowing freely. They develop self-knowledge that allows them to relate more consciously and maturely. They learn to love themselves unconditionally, so they can offer clean and free love to the other person. Jung said that true love is only possible between two people who have already completed themselves individually. Not between two halves seeking to become a whole, but between two wholes choosing to create something even greater together. And this is exactly what happens during separation periods between destined souls. They're not moving away, they're preparing. They're not giving up, they're strengthening themselves. And when they finally reunite, the connection that emerges is much more powerful than anything they could have created if they had stayed together from the first moment. The second force that appears to try to separate destined souls is external circumstances. Jung discovered that the universe has a very peculiar sense of timing when it comes to these special connections. It rarely allows two souls to meet when everything is perfectly aligned for them to be together immediately. Instead, it orchestrates encounters at moments that seem impossible. One is married, the other is moving to another country. One is going through a professional crisis, the other is caring for sick parents. One is beginning a new life cycle, the other is ending an old one. And all these apparent adversities aren't obstacles that destiny placed in the path out of cruelty. They're precise tests to verify whether the connection is genuinely transcendent or just intense attraction disguised as true love. Because any connection can flourish when conditions are ideal. But only bonds of truly destined souls manage not just to survive, but to strengthen when everything seems to be conspiring against them. Jung observed that these challenging circumstances serve multiple purposes. First, they test the authenticity of feelings. If the connection disappears at the first difficulty, it probably wasn't a soul bond, it was just projection or fantasy. Second, they strengthen the determination and commitment of both people. When you fight for something, when you choose to preserve something even when it requires sacrifices, you develop much deeper appreciation and dedication than you would have if everything were easy. Third, they create a shared history of overcoming that becomes the solid foundation upon which the future relationship can be built. But perhaps the most subtle and powerful force that tries to separate destined souls is society itself. We live in a culture that doesn't understand or value connections that transcend social conventions. Society expects relationships to follow predictable patterns, conventional timelines, familiar structures. It doesn't know how to deal with two people who recognize themselves as destined souls, and who, therefore, operate according to their own laws that don't fit traditional models. Jung understood that the deepest and most transformative connections have always been misunderstood by most people, and destined souls often face criticism, judgments, social pressures that try to force them to conform to expectations that simply don't apply to the type of bond they share. Family members may not understand why someone would end a stable marriage for a connection that seems complicated. Friends may not comprehend why someone would wait years for a person when they could easily find someone available. Society as a whole may label these connections as obsession, fantasy, emotional immaturity, but Jung discovered that these external pressures, paradoxically, serve to purify and strengthen the bond between destined souls. They force both people to become very clear about what they feel, very firm in their convictions, very committed to their truth. When you have to defend your love against the entire world, when you have to choose between social approval and emotional authenticity, you develop an inner certainty and strength of character that become unshakable. Jung also identified that destined souls go through what he called the shadow period. It's when all unresolved issues, all unhealed traumas, all dysfunctional patterns of both people emerge simultaneously to be worked through. It's as if the intensity of the connection activated everything that needed to be cleaned and transformed in both psyches, so they could relate from a place of greater integrity and consciousness. This period can be extremely challenging because both people project onto each other their deepest fears, their oldest wounds, their most rigid defenses. They may fight about apparently insignificant things that actually represent deep existential issues. They may get irritated with behaviors of the other that actually mirror aspects of themselves they don't want to recognize. They may feel simultaneously deep love and inexplicable resistance, magnetic attraction, and an impulse to flee. Jung understood that this period was absolutely necessary for two destined souls to eventually relate cleanly and consciously. Because if they simply ignored or repressed these issues, they would continue operating unconsciously in the relationship, creating repetitive patterns of conflict and misunderstanding. But when two people have the courage to traverse this shadow period together, when they choose to look at their own rejected aspects through the mirror the other offers, something extraordinary happens. They begin to become more whole, more authentic, more capable of genuine love. And the connection between them transforms from something based on projection and fantasy to something based on real recognition and mutual acceptance. The third force that appears to try to separate destined souls is what Jung called the call of individuation. Each person has a unique journey of self-discovery and personal development that needs to be fulfilled. And sometimes, for this journey to happen completely, it's necessary for the person to go through periods of solitude, of independent exploration, of growth, that can only happen when they're not being influenced or supported by another person, even if it's someone they love deeply. Jung observed that truly destined souls respect and support each other's individuation process, even when it means accepting periods of temporary separation. They understand that true love isn't possessive, isn't dependent, isn't limiting, it's liberating. And sometimes, loving someone deeply means giving that person the space and time necessary for them to become completely who they were destined to be. These individuation periods are painful, but they're also sacred. Because it's during these times of chosen solitude that each person develops the internal resources, personal clarity, strength of character, that will allow them to contribute uniquely and powerfully to the eventual union with their destined soul. Jung said that two people can only create a truly transcendent relationship when each has already developed a solid relationship with themselves. And this development can only happen in solitude, in silence, in deep introspection that requires courage to look at oneself without external distractions or supports. During these periods of separate individuation, destined souls frequently experience a form of communication that Jung called amplified synchronicity. They begin to notice impossible coincidences related to each other. They may be thinking of the other person exactly when they're thinking of them. They may receive signs, symbols, messages through apparently random sources that carry specific meanings related to the connection they share. They may have simultaneous dreams, parallel insights, experiences that mirror what the other person is living at the same moment, even being in completely different places. Jung understood that these synchronicities weren't coincidences, but evidence that two consciousnesses can maintain an active connection through dimensions that transcend physical space and time. And these experiences serve as constant reminders that, despite temporary physical separation, the connection between souls continues alive, active, growing and deepening in ways that challenge all rational logic. They're like messages from the universe confirming that the bond is real, that it's lasting, and that the right moment for physical reunion will come. Jung discovered that there's a fundamental difference between destined souls and what many people erroneously call soulmates. The popular idea of soulmate suggests there's a perfect person for each of us, someone who completes us and makes our life easy and harmonious. But destined souls don't come to complete us, they come to awaken us. They don't come to make our life easy, but to make it meaningful. They don't come to give us answers, but to ask us the right questions. A destined soul connection is transformative by nature. It challenges you to grow, to question your limitations, to transcend your own boundaries. It forces you to confront aspects of yourself you'd prefer to ignore, to develop qualities you didn't even know you possessed, to become a more courageous, more authentic, more integrated version of who you are. And this process of mutual transformation is precisely what makes no external force able to truly separate these souls, because they're not just connected by attraction or compatibility, but by a shared evolutionary purpose. They recognize each other as partners in a journey of spiritual growth that's much greater than either could accomplish alone. And when two people share such a deep purpose, when they recognize each other as collaborators in a mission of mutual development, the bond between them becomes practically indestructible. But Jung also warned about a phenomenon he observed in many of these extraordinary connections, what he called the test of absolute faith. There's a moment in the journey of destined souls when everything seems lost, when all external evidence suggests the connection won't work out, that the obstacles are too great, that maybe it's time to give up and move on. It's the moment when the connection is tested, not by external circumstances, but by each person's capacity to maintain faith in the bond even when there's no logical reason to believe it will work. Jung observed that this test almost always happens before destined souls finally manage to be together stably and lastingly. It's as if the universe wanted absolute certainty, that both people choose the connection not out of convenience, not from lack of other options, not from emotional dependency, but from a deep and unshakable recognition that they belong to each other on a level that transcends all practical considerations. This period can last months or even years. It's characterized by an almost total absence of external signs of hope. Communication may cease completely. Circumstances may become apparently impossible. Other people may enter both their lives, creating the impression they've moved on. But Jung discovered that, for truly destined souls, this period of apparent impossibility doesn't weaken the connection. It purifies it. It burns everything that's based on ego, need, fantasy, and leaves only what's essential, eternal, true. During the test of absolute faith, each person is confronted with the same fundamental question. Would you still choose this person, even if you had the guarantee that you could never be together the way you'd like? And the answer to this question reveals everything. If the answer is yes, if both people discover they would love and choose each other even without the prospect of a conventional future together, then the connection has completely transcended the realm of personal needs and entered the realm of unconditional love. And Jung observed that it's exactly when these people reach this state of love totally detached from outcome that the universe, almost magically, begins to remove the obstacles that had made union apparently impossible. It's as if the capacity to love without conditions, without expectations, without demands were the key that unlocks all doors that seemed permanently closed. Because at this point, the bond between souls has become so pure, so strong, so aligned with higher purposes that no force in the universe can any longer resist its manifestation on the physical plane. Jung also identified that destined souls develop what he called a secret language. They create forms of communication that are unique to them, that operate through symbols, synchronicities, shared experiences that no one else can understand or interpret. It might be numbers that appear repeatedly in both their lives, songs that play at significant moments, dreams that mirror each other, or simply a capacity to feel each other's emotional state across physical distances. This secret language serves as a way to keep the connection alive and active, even during periods of separation or difficulty. It's a constant confirmation that the bond is real, special, destined. And the more developed this language becomes, the more impossible it becomes for external forces to interfere in the communication between these souls. They develop connection channels that operate completely outside conventional systems of human communication. Channels that no distance can interrupt, no circumstance can block, no external interference can contaminate. It's as if they created their own private dimension, where they can meet and communicate regardless of what's happening in the physical world around them. The fourth force that tries to separate destined souls is what Jung called linear time pressure. We live in a reality where everything is measured in terms of conventional chronology, where people expect relationships to follow logical and predictable progression within socially acceptable timeframes. But destined soul connections operate according to a different time, a sacred time that doesn't conform to linear expectations. These souls may meet and immediately recognize they belong to each other, but still need years to be ready for stable physical union. They may spend decades separated and then reunite as if they'd seen each other yesterday. They may live parallel lives, developing independently, until the perfect cosmic moment when their paths finally cross definitively. Jung observed that trying to force a destined soul connection to conform to conventional temporal expectations is one of the most effective ways to damage it. These bonds have their own organic rhythm, their own temporal wisdom that must be respected. And part of the journey of destined souls is learning to trust this sacred timing, even when it doesn't make sense to the rational mind, even when it frustrates the immediate desires of the ego, even when it challenges all social conventions about how relationships should develop. Jung also discovered that destined souls frequently experience what he called value inversion. Things that previously seemed important to them, social approval, financial security, conformity to family expectations, begin to lose meaning before the magnitude of the connection they share. They begin to value authenticity above convenience, emotional truth above practical stability, spiritual growth above material comfort. This value inversion can be disturbing not just for themselves, but for all the people around who don't understand why someone would throw away a perfectly acceptable life for a connection that seems complicated and uncertain. But Jung understood that this inversion isn't a conscious choice. It's a natural consequence of the awakening that happens when a soul finds its true counterpart. It's impossible to continue living according to superficial values when you've been touched by something deep and transformative. It's impossible to continue prioritizing external security when you've discovered a source of internal meaning that transcends any external circumstance. And this value inversion, though initially destabilizing, eventually becomes one of the greatest forces that protect and strengthen the bond between destined souls, because it aligns them with priorities and principles that are truly sustainable long-term. The Jungian concept of anima and animus also plays a crucial role in destined soul connections. Jung discovered that each person carries within themselves aspects of the opposite sex. Men carry an internal feminine part called anima, and women carry an internal masculine part called animus. In most relationships, people project these internal parts onto partners, creating attractions based on superficial complementarity. But in destined soul connections, something different happens. Instead of simply projecting anima or animus onto the other, each person recognizes aspects of their own totality reflected in the other person. It's as if they saw not just a projection of their undeveloped parts, but a mirror of their complete potential. This creates a much more complex and evolutionary dynamic. Because instead of simply seeking completeness through the other, each person is inspired to develop their own wholeness, their own integration of masculine and feminine aspects, their own capacity to be a complete and balanced person. And paradoxically, the more each person becomes whole individually, the deeper and more meaningful becomes the connection they share. Jung observed that there's a final stage in the journey of destined souls that he called conscious union. It's when two people who have passed all tests, overcome all obstacles, traversed all periods of growth and individuation, finally meet as fully developed and conscious beings, ready to create together something that transcends anything they could accomplish separately. This conscious union isn't based on need, dependency, projection, or fantasy. It's based on free choice, mutual recognition, shared purpose, and unconditional love. It's a partnership between two people who have already completed themselves individually and who now choose to collaborate in creating something greater. Perhaps a family, perhaps creative work, perhaps a mission of service to the world, perhaps simply a living demonstration of how true love can manifest in physical reality. Jung believed that these conscious unions between destined souls aren't just blessings for the people involved, but important contributions to the evolution of human consciousness as a whole. They serve as examples and inspirations for other people who are still searching for authentic and meaningful connections. They demonstrate that it's possible to transcend conventional limitations of human relationships and create bonds based on the highest principles of love, growth, and mutual service. But perhaps Jung's most important discovery about destined souls is that their union isn't an end, but a beginning. When two people finally manage to be together after the entire journey of growth, challenges, and transformation, they discover that their connection wasn't just about themselves, but about something much greater they were called to manifest in the world. Destined souls, who manage to unite consciously, frequently discover they have a shared mission, a purpose that goes beyond their personal happiness and extends to service of humanity's collective evolution. They may become healers, teachers, artists, spiritual leaders, or simply living examples of how relationships can be transformative and evolutionary, instead of limiting and possessive. Jung saw these unions as laboratories of human development, places where new possibilities of connection, intimacy, and mutual growth can be explored and then shared with the broader world. When two people go through this entire journey together, when they overcome all obstacles and reach conscious union, they realize they were never truly separated. All periods of distance, all circumstances that seemed to conspire against them, all forces that appeared to try to separate them, were actually parts of a larger process of preparation and purification. They were opportunities for each to develop the strength, clarity, maturity necessary to sustain a connection of such depth and power. Temporary physical separation was never really separation, it was incubation. Obstacles were never truly obstacles, they were tests of faith and determination. Difficulties were never punishments, they were growth opportunities. And when two destined souls finally understand this, when they look back and see how each apparently negative part of their journey contributed to something greater, they develop a gratitude and reverence for the universe's wisdom that transcends any philosophy or religion. If this video touched something within you, if at some point you recognized yourself in these words, write here in the comments, "I recognize our connection." That way, I'll know the message reached your heart. And if you felt that this soul recognition speaks directly to your own story, then you'll understand why I prepared 2 guides that continue exactly this journey. The ebook, 21 Days of Transformation with Carl Jung. Because finding a destined soul awakens changes, you need to learn to integrate into your daily life. This is a step-by-step guide to transform the impact of this connection into real personal growth. And the survival manual for difficult days. Because the encounter with your destined soul doesn't always happen easily. Often obstacles, temporary separations, and trials come along with it. This manual gives you support to traverse these moments without losing yourself. The link is in the first pinned comment of this video. Now remember that the forces that seem to try to separate you aren't your enemies, they're your teachers. Obstacles aren't punishments, they're preparations. Temporary separations aren't endings, they're incubations. And if the connection is truly destined, if it's aligned with greater purposes that transcend personal needs, then no force in the universe can prevent it from eventually manifesting in the highest possible form. Trust the process, honor the journey, and know that when 2 truly destined souls meet, they create together a force that is literally indestructible. Thank you for being here. We'll see each other in the next video.